Contemplate the fairness in the following baseball sports analogy in which the rules are drastically altered to ensure a victory for the home team. To begin with, instead of the visitors coming to bat first with the home team taking the field, the reverse holds true. Second, the home team is allowed to remain at bat regardless of the number of outs recorded by the visitors until it is able to push across home plate at least a single run. Then, before the visitors have an opportunity to bat, the umpire halts the game, declaring the home team the victor in a shutout. Fair? Hardly. But such a situation played out Tuesday, October 26, 2021, not on a national pastime field of dreams, but in a Wake County Superior courtroom. In this true-life legal scenario, Crystal Mangum, the single black mother of three, best known by the media as the Duke Lacrosse accuser, was the visiting team. WRAL-5 News and its CEO James Goodman represented the home team, and Superior Court Judge Mark A. Sternlicht presided as the umpire. Wednesday, January 6, 2021, is noted for the insurrection on the nation's capital and an unsuccessful coup attempt by Trump-led Republican loyalists. That same day, an event of significance but much lesser magnitude was taking place in Raleigh, North Carolina's Wake County Superior Courthouse, as Crystal Mangum's advocate and fiancé, Dr. Sidney Harr, filed on her behalf a libel defamation lawsuit against WRAL-5 News and its CEO, James F. Goodman, for two online articles published on November 22, 2013 and December 31, 2014. On Tuesday, October 26, 2021, a motions hearing was held in Wake County Courthouse in which Ms. Mangum appeared and represented herself pro se against defendants WRAL-5 News and its CEO. They were represented by Amanda Martin of the Stevens, Martin, Vaughn, and Payditch PLLC law firm. The proceeding presided over by Superior Court Judge Mark A. Sternlicht. Understanding the reasons upon which this lawsuit by the female African-American Durham native came about, and comprehension of the ramifications of its final courtroom outcome, requires revisiting events more than 15 years earlier. In 2006, the Duke University lacrosse team members were known for being raucous and uncouth, and in maintaining this well-deserved reputation, they hosted a beer-guzzling, stripper-oogling spring break bash at a Durham bungalow on Monday, March 13th. Crystal Mangum, a co-ed at North Carolina Central University studying psychology, months earlier was recruited by an escort service to perform exotic dancing at a men's club, thereby enabling her to supplement her income to better support herself and her two children. On March 13, 2006, she was assigned to perform exotic dancing or stripping entertainment at the lacrosse-hosted party, but aborted her dance routine early on after degrading name-calling and profane gestures from the onlookers. The approximately 50 attendees were angered by the brevity of the performance as Mangum sought refuge in the bathroom of the single-family Durham residence. It is in the bathroom that Miss Mangum claimed, and always maintained, that she was sexually assaulted by 3 of the partygoers. Mangum eventually exited the structure to a shouting chorus of the N-word epithet by the student-athlete partiers. Then Durham District Attorney Mike Nifong led the prosecution of the case against 3 Duke Lacrosse players chosen from a photo lineup with a high degree of certainty by Miss Mangum. Nifong being diligent in pursuit of his prosecution despite advice from colleagues and others to drop the criminal case. The North Carolina State Bar initiated its own grievance complaint investigation into D.A. Nifong's actions in this case mere weeks after it began, it eventually forcing the intrepid-led Durham prosecutor off the case by the year's end. D.A. Nifong turned the case over to then North Carolina Attorney General Roy Cooper in early January 2007. With his office supposedly conducting an inquiry spanning more than 3 months. A 6-hour interview with the principal complainant, Mangum, in late March 2007 was never recorded by audio, video, or transcription. On April 11, 2007, A.G. Cooper made a public promulgation that he was dropping all criminal charges in the sexual assault case and took the unprecedented step of declaring the 3 Duke defendants to be innocent. Cooper's proclamation of innocence laid the groundwork for Duke University settling out of court with the 3 defendants in the amount of $20 million each, and it was the basis upon which the media reported as fact that Crystal Mangum lied about being sexually assaulted. Being a black sexual assault accuser against 3 white Duke student athletes from families of wealth, influence, and privilege, Mangum was targeted by the media, vilified on a nationwide scale to become a societal pariah in a mold similar to ostracized celebrity athlete O.J. Simpson in the wake of his acquittal in the deaths of his wife and her friend Ronald Golden. An opportunity for payback presented itself in mid-February 2010 when, during a domestic confrontation, Miss Mangum set the wardrobe of her boyfriend ablaze in the bathtub of the duplex apartment she rented. Upon learning of her identity and connection with the Duke Lacrosse case 4 years earlier, the prosecutor pummeled her with a litany of criminal charges, which included first-degree arson, attempted murder, identity theft, communicating threats, etc. She served 90 days of confinement at the Durham County Detention Center before being released under house arrest. By the time of her December 2010 trial, the most serious felony charges had been dismissed. The felony arson charge ended in a mistrial. She was convicted of 3 misdemeanors, including endangering juveniles, and she was sentenced to time served, an unpopular decision for many who were clamoring for a much longer sentence out of spite related to the Lacrosse case. But the 3 months of incarceration had damaged her, as she had been fired from her job, expelled from the master's program at NC Central University's graduate school, lost her apartment, along with most of her personal belongings. She was no longer financially independent and relied on her friends from church to help provide shelter and support for her and her 3 offspring. Early in 2011, Miss Mangum met African-American house painter Reginald Day, whose employer had contracted to work on the house where she was staying. By late February, early March 2011, she and her children moved into Mr. Day's Durham apartment on a symbiotic financial relationship that progressed swiftly into an intimate one which she described as overbearing, with his demands that she abandon all contact with her male friends, enforced by his monitoring of her cell phone calls. Late Saturday, April 2nd, 2011, Day, an alcoholic, took Mangum to a family party to show her off, and after a couple of hours the two left for home, chauffeured by Day's cousin, Hassan Wilson. In the apartment parking lot, Miss Mangum recognized a Durham police officer waiting for a tow truck to remove an illegally parked vehicle. The two engaged in conversation, which angered Day. Once the police officer left the scene and the two were alone, a jealousy-enraged and alcoholic-intoxicated Day verbally berated Mangum, his hostility turning physical with punches to her head and fingernail gouges to her face. He then retrieved steak knives from the kitchen and threw them at her for target practice in the master bedroom. Mangum fleeing into the master bedroom's bathroom. Day followed, using brute bodily force to knock the door frame of the locked bathroom door from its jamb, whereupon he grabbed his quarry by the hair and dragged her into the bedroom, where he straddled atop her and began to choke her with his hands. Mangum's desperately probing right hand found a steak knife lying close by, and she used it to poke Day in his left side to elicit the desired outcome when he jumped from atop her, cursing, she taking the opportunity to gain her feet and flee, grabbing her purse on the way out. She walked to a friend's residence at an adjacent apartment complex, which provided her with temporary sanctuary for several hours, until the Durham police came by and arrested her on site. Reginald Day, meanwhile, was transported by ambulance to Duke University Hospital's emergency department, where his non-life-threatening wound was assessed prior to his transfer to the operating room, where he underwent successful emergency surgery. Day's post-operative prognosis for a full recovery was reported in an online WRAL5 news article on Tuesday, April 5, 2011. This would be the last known media coverage on Day's condition while he was alive. By Wednesday evening of April 6, 2011, Mr. Day had become severely agitated, and he was moved to the surgical intensive care unit for treatment of likely delirium tremens. While treating this condition, it was deemed necessary to intubate him to provide enriched oxygen and protect his airway. However, the endotracheal tube was positioned in his esophagus instead of trachea, which prevented oxygen from entering his lungs, thereby depriving blood of oxygen needed to sustain cells of the body. Though the carbon dioxide end-tidal monitor indicated misplacement of the tube, it was left in place after visual assessment with a laryngoscope convinced the medical staff that it was properly inserted in the trachea. The unrecognized errant intubation resulted in cardiac arrest, which alerted the medical team. Removal of the tube and re-intubation properly in the airway concomitantly with institution of cardiopulmonary resuscitation resulted in reestablishment of spontaneous circulation after 20 minutes. Unfortunately, his brain cells had been without oxygen too long, and he was brain dead and in a comatose state. After a week of observation and monitoring without any sign of neurologic improvement, staff concluded Day's brain death comatose state was irreversible, and, with approval from Day's family, he was electively removed from life support, and he died on Wednesday the 13th. The following morning of Thursday, April 14, 2011, then North Carolina Deputy Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Clay Nichols conducted an autopsy on Mr. Day, with lead investigator Durham Officer Marianne Bond in attendance. The following Monday of April 18, 2011, using Dr. Nichols' autopsy report as its basis, a Durham grand jury indicted Miss Mangum for murder in Day's death, with Officer Bond being the sole witness for the prosecution. Dr. Nichols made no appearance. Mangum was also indicted on 2 counts of larceny of chosen action, alleging she stole 2 cashier's checks in actions prosecution claim resulted in Day's death. The baseless larceny indictments, though totally lacking in probable cause, justified by applying the felony murder rule, upgrading the murder charge to first degree, conviction for which is a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. The abominable reality is that the state wanted to sentence Crystal Mangum to a life sentence, not for allegedly killing Reginald Day, but as spiteful retaliation as payback for her accusations of sexual assault against the 3 Duke Lacrosse defendants. Dr. Sidney Harr, a retired physician, supporter of Mike Nifong, and advocate for Crystal Mangum, was suspicious of the Nichols autopsy report, which was released to the public in August 2011, following a 6-month delay. On March 27, 2012, Dr. Harr's suspicions were confirmed when he surreptitiously received 7 manila envelopes containing prosecution discovery, including Mr. Day's hospital medical records. The autopsy report by medical examiner Dr. Nichols contained fabricated findings controverted by hospital and medical records, and a false and unsubstantiated conclusion that Mr. Day died secondary to complications of a stab wound inflicted by Mangum. The autopsy report was further flawed by its failure to include, per protocol, photographic documentation of injuries and pertinent non-injuries to the decedent. Four consecutive defense attorneys who represented Mangum in her murder case refused to meet with Dr. Harr to discuss the medical and manner of death issues, limiting their defense strategy to the issue of self-defense only. This stratagem mainly benefited Duke University Hospital by concealing its fundamental role in Day's death. By mid-February 2013, Mangum's bail had been reduced to a figure attainable, and she was released from custody to await trial, ultimately scheduled to begin November 12, 2013. Just prior to the beginning of her trial, Dr. Nichols was fired from his position as North Carolina Deputy Chief Medical Examiner.
The medical examiner's office is critical to helping solve crimes and to promote justice.
At that time, he was also under consideration by Orange County District Attorney Jim Woodall for criminal investigation related to his work in other forensic cases. Jury selection produced a biased panel consisting of 3 jurors with ties to Duke University Hospital, 2 being employees and the 3rd the wife of a surgeon at the very hospital where the fatal medical malpractice took place. A 4th juror, who was reported to have violated jury instructions in an attempt to influence other jurors adversely to Mangum, was allowed to remain seated. Mangum's defense attorney, Daniel Meyer, made no challenge towards these 4 jurors who made up 1/3 of the jury. Because the state's star witness, Dr. Clay Nichols, was recently under consideration for criminal investigation for his work in other cases, the presiding trial judge, Paul Ridgway, wanted to review the medical examiner's personnel folder. It contained an 18-page document which the judge deemed relevant to the case, and he allowed both sides to review it in camera and stipulated in an order that it was for, quote, attorney eyes only, unquote. The document was then placed under seal without Miss Mangum getting a chance to see it. On Tuesday, November 19, 2013, Dr. Nichols took the witness stand and under direct exam gave materially perjured testimony as to the nature of the alleged wounds Mr. Day sustained at Miss Mangum's hand. The medical examiner also declared that Mr. Day's spleen had been removed during emergency surgery on April 3rd and was therefore not available for examination at autopsy 11 days later. Dr. Nichols' testimony about Day's spleen not only contradicted the operative report, which stated the organ sustained a minor lesion and was treated with electrocautery and Surgicel, but refuted his own autopsy report in which he gave an extensive description of the spleen. The rhetorical question is, how can an organ be described at autopsy when it was supposedly removed during surgery 11 days prior? Answer: it can't. Mangum's defense attorney, Mr. Meyer, did not seize upon the splenic discrepancy, most likely because he was unaware of it, having been allowed only 10 weeks to prepare for the murder trial once he was assigned to represent Mangum in early September 2013, and his unwillingness to discuss the medical issues of the case with Dr. Haar. The cross-examination of Dr. Nichols by Meyer lasted less than 11 minutes by stopwatch, and after the prosecution rested, Mangum took the stand in her own defense and against her attorney's advice. Prior to testifying, her attorney Meyer warned her against making any statements related to medical issues at Duke University Hospital. Cross-examination by prosecutor Charlene Coggins-Franks consisted of framing questions of alleged criminality, to which Miss Mangum answered in the negative as to their occurrence.
So when they said you said that you were going to stab him, you're telling the truth, or? No. Is it true Reggie was when he ran out of the apartment first? No. Matter of fact, he ran out and people saw him running out, didn't they? No. And you came to the door and you told them everything's fine, you slammed the door and went back into the apartment, didn't you? No. And that's when he went around tearing up everything, didn't you? No. You stabbed him in the hallway, didn't you, man? No. He was trying to get away from him, wasn't he, man? No. Matter of fact, he had bruises all over his left arm where he was trying to block you with the knife. He was trying to stab him. He was coming towards me. He was coming towards you, and so you stabbed him? Is that what you're saying now? No. He was trying to defend himself from that knife you were trying to stab him with, wasn't he? No. That's how he got all those bruises and cuts on his arm. No. No, he was on top of me, screaming.
Late Thursday, November 21, 2013, 10 days after the trial commenced, the jury was sent to deliberate, never having heard mention the words, quote, esophageal intubation, unquote, never being told Day died after being electively removed from life support, and never hearing about the exonerative email from an unidentified individual to Mangum's first attorney, which seemed to acknowledge Duke University's role in Day's death and attempts to keep it quiet, presumably by muzzling the media. The following morning of Friday, November 22, 2013, the jury announced its verdict, convicting her of second-degree murder in the death of her boyfriend Reginald Day and acquitting her of both counts of larceny of chosen action. That afternoon, Judge Ridgway sentenced Miss Mangum to state imprisonment in the range of 14 to 18 years, and she was taken from the courtroom in handcuffs directly to prison, the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh. Later that day, WRAL 5 News published an article on its online website titled, quote, Mangum found guilty in boyfriend stabbing death, unquote. Its confusing second paragraph reads, quote, the jury found Mangum guilty of second-degree murder in the April 3, 2011 stabbing of her boyfriend. He died 10 days later of complications at Duke University Hospital, unquote. That Mangum stabbed Day on April 3, 2011 is not in dispute. His manner of death is in question and was not clarified by the vague explanation repeated from the autopsy report conclusion that Day, quote, died 10 days later of complications, unquote. The exact nature of the complication is never specified by Dr. Nichols or in any official document. After her conviction, Mangum was appointed a defense appellate attorney, Ann B. Peterson. Dr. Haar made himself available to her, but was not called. With little or no input from Crystal Mangum, appellate attorney Peterson filed a weak single issue which was destined to fail from a myriad of compelling ones, namely that the testimony of Mangum's previous boyfriend Milton Walker as a 404B witness was improper. Several months later, in December 2014, a response from the North Carolina Attorney General's office in opposition to the appeal was filed, which elicited a reply from Ms. Mangum's attorney filed with the court on December 29, 2014. On December 31, 2014, WRAL 5 News published online an article titled, quote, Mangum appeals murder conviction in boyfriend stabbing death, unquote. The repeated reference by WRAL 5 News and other media of Day's demise being a, quote, stabbing death, unquote, or, quote, fatally stabbed, unquote, irked Dr. Haar, as he was aware that the manner of death was an accident and not a homicide. He expressed this in an email sent on February 11, 2015 to all legislators, including Rick Glazer, future head of the North Carolina Justice Center, and future State Attorney General Josh Stein. The subject matter title of the email read, quote, Mangum convicted of non-existent crime, unquote. He received no reply from any of the legislators. Despite being a retired physician, Dr. Haar's proclamations of Mangum's innocence were ignored by politicians media, civil rights, social justice organizations, and others. Following a brief 5-minute presentation on Tuesday, June 25, 2019, before the North Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, which was dismally received, Dr. Haar came to the realization that the ineffectiveness of his advocacy for Crystal Mangum was due more to the messenger than the message. The following Monday, July 1st, 2019, Dr. Haar placed a call to world-renowned forensic pathologist and medical legal expert analyst, Dr. Cyril H. Wecht,